Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler, episode 919. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about beaches and caves, rugged mountains and medieval villages, luxury hotels, cooking classes, and cycling on water, almost, as we go to Mallorca in Spain. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Mallorca. I'd like to welcome to the show two of my favorite traveling companions, at least from this year, and that is Kristin Henning from TravelPast50.com and Courtney Drake McDonough from RealFoodTraveler.com. And the three of us are half of a team of people that went on a press trip to Mallorca recently with Visit Spain and with the Mallorcan Tourism Board. Kristin and Courtney, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And we're going to talk today about Mallorca. And we were there for, how long were we there for? 6 nights, I think.
I think it was only 5 nights.
Yeah. It seemed longer than that.
It did seem longer. We packed a lot in.
Yeah, for those of you who haven't been on a press trip, which I know is most of you who are listening, you would never want to do the kind of itinerary that one does on a press trip in your own vacation time. You would want to spread it out over more days because they tend to get a little packed with things to do. Mallorca, island off the coast of Spain, part of Spain. I'm going to do this in turn with Kristin and then Courtney. Why should someone go to Mallorca?
I can start, Chris. I am really thinking selfishly of why I went to Mallorca, and I just will assume that a lot of travelers like me follow their nose and decide where they're going next because of their past experiences and circumstance and serendipity. I first want to say that the timing of why I wanted to go to Mallorca was really based on new direct flights from Newark to Palma. So this really saves for North Americans an extra flight. If you can get to Newark and then directly to Palma, that's really a time-saving jump for your travel
Seasonal
time.
flights, made it to September right now.
Yeah, but also I think there's chatter of they're adding other direct flight from other North American cities. So we'll see. But yeah, it is seasonal at this point. So that's a big reason for why now. But the other reason for me to travel to Mallorca is that the Balearic Islands, of which Mallorca is the biggest and most populated, is a region of Spain, one of 17 regions. And for me, it was the only region I hadn't visited. And it seemed like an embarrassment because it is also one of the most visited, the most touristed parts of Spain. So I was very curious and I had a lot of preconceptions, most of which I discovered were wrong. So that's why I like to travel, is to satisfy my curiosity and find out when I'm wrong.
And Courtney, I'm going to guess you don't usually follow just your nose, but your palate sometimes when you are
Yes.
traveling as the real food traveler here.
Yes, definitely. And my case was really quite different than both of yours because I know you'd both been to Spain quite a bit, except for literally an afternoon and a bus ride from the airport in Barcelona to the cruise port last year when I went on a Mediterranean cruise. That was the extent of my experience in Spain. So I was just thrilled to have the opportunity to spend any more time than an afternoon's bus ride in any part of Spain, but Mallorca particularly intrigued me because it is an island and because the focus of Real Food Traveler is experiencing the truly authentic food when you visit a
Mhm.
destination. I was really interested in the idea of what happens with that when you are a world unto yourself, but still have a connection to a larger mainland. So that was my big push to go.
Excellent. And partly for me, I was invited, but I had been to Majorca before, but only briefly. I had been there on a cruise. You talk about only being in Spain on the way to the cruise port. I had been there in a cruise from Barcelona to Rome pre-pandemic, so I don't know how many years ago, but really had only had a chance to do two things: to walk around Palma, which is the main city in Majorca, and then to get out the caves, which we did not get to on this trip. So when we get to that, I'll talk a little bit about that. But that's the only thing I had done, and so I was interested to see more of the island. It is not a small island, so I was surprised to learn, and when I was doing research for the article that I wrote on this, it is almost identical to the size of Long Island. It is about 4 square miles different from the size of Long Island. It's not 100-mile long like Long Island. I think it's 80, so it's a little wider than that, but the actual size of the two is the same, except you get a whole lot more geography in Mallorca because you get a lot of the hills, especially the Sierra Tramontana, which run down the spine of the island. So when we talk about what to do, I think we'll start in Palma because not only did we start in Palma, but most other people will either fly in or if they're taking a cruise will enter in through Palma. What were your impressions of Palma and what would you recommend to do or not to do that we did?
Palma is very much more of a historic city than I expected, and it offers a lot in addition to the beaches, which it's known for.
Right.
Even the island is known for its beaches first and foremost, and for holidays there for the beaches,
Which we didn't get to a single
which we
beach
didn't
on our
really
trip.
do,
We
except
did not
for
focus on that, but it is known for its beaches. And if you want to go for the beaches, all power to you.
yes, and I'll just back up a second there too, that there are a few long beaches, maybe 10 or so, and a lot of the other beaches are small coves, but Palma does have a long beach. It's also a
Right.
port city. It has up to now, with new regulations, 3 cruise ships a day, or is that a week coming
I
in?
think that's at a time. Yeah.
At a time, at any given time. So it's a big port city. It's a beautiful view onto the port and the sea, but the city itself is much more complex and historic than I imagined. One of the first things that we did there, and had I been on my own, it would have also been the first thing, was to visit the cathedral there, which is called
Yeah.
the La Seu, because it is a basilica type of cathedral. And it's really remarkable. At Travel Past 50, we cover a lot of the cathedrals of Spain. We've done a lot of very focused pictures and descriptions of the history of cathedrals across Spain. And this one is really spectacular and impressed me in ways that I didn't expect. One is its sheer size. It's massive, but it is actually tallest cathedral in Spain, not bigger than Sevilla, but taller. And it is the third tallest cathedral, I believe, in Europe or the world. I was having trouble fact checking that.
And one of the reasons that it's taller is they built it around the existing mosque so that they would have a place to have worship in while they were building a cathedral, which is good because they built the cathedral for, 300 years or something? It took a
even
while.
more. Yes, like 600 years.
It took a while to finish the cathedral, so it was hundreds of years in before they tore down the mosque. And so they built around it, which is, I thought, an odd. There aren't that many places they've done that. They did that in Cordoba also.
Cordoba has the same thing. And the mosque, in fact, was built on a earlier Christian church too. So layers upon layers. But it is overall a Gothic cathedral, I think, is the essential feel of the architecture. And you can go up the 300 some stairs. Very worthwhile to see the whole buttress system, to see views of the city and the port, and to look at the star of the structure itself is a giant 3-meter across rosette window. And you can see that from the outside as well and capture how the construction of that within the stone framework works. It's really fascinating. So I enjoyed getting up there to the rooftop. And I'll just quickly add that on the interior, what's remarkable is that there are signs of that workmanship through the centuries of its being built and even up to the present, with Gaudí contributing in the 20th century to
electrify the cathedral.
Yeah, he made the sightlines better, the sound better. He brought in some very funky Gaudí-esque structure, the sort of the crown that hangs over the altar plate. And then in the 21st century, there is a chapel that is designed by Miguel Barceló, this chapel is basically a ceramic scene of
free hanging onto the cathedral wall so they could take it out again later if they wanted to.
Yeah, it's just
odd.
It feels like you're underwater, and it's the story of the fishes and the loaves, and then these very dark, they look like etched black glass windows above it. It feels like you're in seaweed.
Not my favorite part of cathedral, I will admit. But.
It's very odd, but that was fun. And that was a very fun visit for me in Palma, as well as just walking through the old town and seeing that it is a city unto itself. It is not a resort. It is a city.
Yeah. And it's by far the largest city there. Now, Courtney wants to talk about food. And she was asking if she could just opt out of everything else, which is not going to be the case. But one of our most fun experiences in Palma was food-based. So I am going to lure you in here a bit talking about the cooking class that we did.
Yes. And actually, can I say something about that side chapel? The clay one, because my arthritic knee would not allow me to climb those 300 steps with you guys. So I was really hanging out down there and was so intrigued by that side chapel because there was no plaque or anything explaining it.
Right. So you really needed a guide. Yeah,
it's so different than everywhere else. And what I thought was fascinating once the guide came down and I got to hear more about it with you is that he created it from the back side of these clay walls, pressing his arms and elbows and knees into it to create these fish, for example, and other things. And the kind of funny thing we all chuckled over was he also pressed his full naked body into the wall, into the clay, to create sort of a crucifix, a Jesus reminiscent thing. But it was too anatomically correct, shall we say, for the parishioners. And so they had to smooth things over and Ken doll him to make it a little bit more acceptable.
I got the impression, too, that he may have, I don't know how to say this on a family-friendly show, it may have not been exactly correct, more hopeful in terms of...
Interesting. So I
there was a
just
term that she used there, and I don't quite remember the exact term, but anyway, yes, it was censored.
But aspirational is what we say in travel, right?
Aspirational was the word I was going for. Thank you very much,
exactly.
Kristin.
So I just wanted to throw that in because I stood there for a long time while you guys were up and down the stairs trying to figure out what I was seeing. So that was fascinating. So yes, we got to do what initially they called it a cooking demonstration versus a cooking class. And I think we were all thinking, oh, are we just going to sit there and watch this guy cook? But no, it really was a class and it was very participatory. And the business is called Moltac, and Molta refers to the fact that the business is literally in a windmill that dates back before the 12th century. They don't know exactly how old it is.
Right.
He's only going by the fact that the earliest maps they have are from the 12th century, and the windmills are on that map. So
Right.
they must predate that. So it's literally within this ancient windmill in the heart of the city. You come around a corner and there it is, and it's crazy. So the molta refers to the grinding grain, which the windmill did, and then the K refers to kitchen. So they totally renovated the inside of it, but definitely honored the history of it, the structure of it. It doesn't look all shiny and new. It's still very authentic looking, but comfortable. Yeah. So there are 2 kitchen rooms and a kind of a living room lounge area in between the 2. So our group went into the far second room, and there's a long dining table in there and a full kitchen and stools set up at the bar. So he presented, Luis Matas is the name of the owner. And his story was interesting, and I did do a podcast with him that you can listen to on Real Food Traveler. What he didn't say in there was he followed in his father's footsteps of being a lawyer reluctantly. That really wasn't his passion, but he did it. And he was a lawyer for a few years before he said, I can't do this anymore. This is not what I want to be doing. And I love stories like that when people decide to follow their passions. So he had opened a restaurant and that went pretty well, but then he got married and had children. And as we all know, restaurants are not that conducive to family life. So he and his wife came up with the idea to open this place. And so after a year or so of doing renovations and going through all the steps to make sure they were honoring it historically and safely, because it was not meant to be a kitchen in there, they were able to open a couple years ago. And so our experience was that there are different themes for cooking classes, and ours was a regional to Spain class. And he had a map up there and the menu laid out, written on a chalkboard. And so before we started, he went through each menu item and told us what region each one was coming from. And then we each got a turn making or helping to make one of the courses. And then at the end, we all get to sit down and enjoy this wonderful feast we made. And Luis sat with us. And he said to me in the podcast that one of his great joys is when people come together, because you don't have to go as a big group. We just happened to.
The group next to us that were having an amazingly hilarious time, as far as we could tell, just like we were, didn't know each other. Group of strangers.
Right. Exactly. So he loves that people come together. Yeah. They're a little nervous at first because they don't know each other. And they start cooking together and having a glass of wine and talking and laughing. And by the time they sit down to dinner, he said people often are divulging deep thoughts and personal stories, and that often
it could be because the wine started flowing earlier is the reason that's happening.
True. But there is something so bonding about cooking classes, and I'm always an advocate for when you travel, try to see if there is a cooking class you can go to exactly like this
I had not been an advocate because I had not done it before, and I am a convert to that now. I think it was quite fun because I say the other group was a group of strangers. We were still a group of strangers too by that point. I think we'd had one dinner out and one day together, but we really didn't know each other that well yet. But I don't think of it that way because by the time the trip ended, it didn't feel that way. But I suspect that this was one of those experiences, and we made paella and tortillas and the local sausage, and you were the one who made this, so you might
Sobrasada.
Yeah,
sobrasada.
sopressata. Super easy dish, 3 ingredients, and it was delicious.
Yeah, it was very good.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting. So the sobrasada, they said, is one of the only sausages they can cure on Mallorca because of the humidity. And I would say when we were there in September, warm weather, but not the hottest weather, it didn't feel to me like it was a humid climate
No.
like some that I have been to. And yet none of the shirts that I washed out in the sink ever dried. So it clearly was more humid than I realized. And they said they can only do this sausage in the wintertime. And even at that, they can only do this sausage that doesn't get very dry. But yeah,
And
interesting
yeah,
experience.
it's a semi-soft sausage that with paprika in it that is spreadable, which I was not expecting when I cut into it at all. And yeah, it's interesting you say that about sopressata can be made on Mallorca, but prosciutto, which we saw in restaurants, the big legs of the prosciuttos on the carriers, cannot be made there because it is too humid. So that's made on the mainland. So you'll see it when you're in Mallorca, but it's not coming from there.
Yeah, I only remember seeing the jamon serrano in one restaurant, literally hanging.
When you listen to the podcast, you'll hear our group laughing in the background. You're in the next room. And I was so
we'll put
glad
a link to the Real Food Traveler so that you can find that podcast easily.
Yeah,
You'll put that in the show notes. I want to move us along from Parma. Before we leave Parma, anything else we should talk about the city? I'm going to go to Courtney first.
Bourne Street is one of the main streets. It's near the Cathedral. It's near one of the other places that we might talk about today, El Fornet de la Soca, a fabulous bakery that cooks and makes ancient things. But it's just this beautiful street with gorgeous architecture, and down the center of it, there are all these little flower markets and cafes, and it's just so charming. You shouldn't miss it.
And then, Kristin, you started to say we didn't have enough time.
We did not have enough time for a couple of things I would love to have seen. One is the Lonja, which is very near the cathedral, an old market customs house that is now used as an event and exhibit space. It was closed when we were there. Gorgeous Gothic building from the outside. And also the Juan Miró Foundation, which is based in Barcelona, has another location in Mallorca because Miró spent a lot of time there. And so there's a museum and Miró Foundation in Palma as well as in Barcelona.
Okay. Excellent.
Konnichiwa, I'm Yuki, a tour leader with Explore. Who knew that hidden among Tokyo's towering skyscrapers was a peaceful tea house surrounded by ancient trees and serene ponds? Actually, I knew. It was my mother's secret sanctuary. Not everyone knows about Tokyo's Hamarikyu Gardens. Arigatou gozaimasu. But you will if you explore. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel, explore.
Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
We did do a couple things right outside of town. We don't have Abby on here, who was our golfer, but Kristin, you and Abby took advantage of, apparently Mallorca is now known for golf. And Kristin, you being such an avid golfer.
Oh, yes, we brought that golf course to its knees. Here, this was really shameful because we're in this lovely, it's called the Arabella golf course. It has three different 18-hole golf courses and then another chip and putt golf course. It is fabulous championship course. The Solheim was there, the women's competition not too long ago. Tiger Woods has played there. And yes, so Abby and I went out and played 9 holes, and it was absolutely beautiful. There are 26 golf courses, I believe, on the island, and they do pride themselves making beginners and champions and pros and amateurs all feel welcome, as we did. We had a lovely time. We got lost and missed hole number 15. We were playing the back nine.
In the rain, too. But
in the rain. I think we lost it because we were going to turn in when we saw a bolt of lightning, but we changed our minds because no one else was going in and it seemed pretty tame. So anyway, yes, it was lovely. And we also had a very nice meal at that country club.
At the country club, and then we also did a stop at a 5-star resort hotel there that was turned into a hotel from a family's palatial estate around the same time. It's now a Marriott property, but it looks more like a palace than it does a hotel, but quite interesting experience there. One of the things that was one of the themes of this trip was how Mallorca, especially in Europe, is known as a budget travel destination, a package travel destination. And I love the fact they told us that in Germany, it is known, and I won't try and do yes, I will try and do the German word, the Putzfraueninsel, or the cleaning lady island, because your cleaning lady could afford to go here on the package tourism. And there's a move over the years. These golf courses were built in the 1960s to try and add more luxury opportunities to the things. And when we get to the northern part of the island, there's actually some luxury properties that have been there for more than 100 years, but really trying to move Mallorca in a direction towards more higher end experiences and not just the package tourism beach vacation. So that was an interesting experience there as well.
I would like to add too, since we're on the hotel topic, that there are close to 100 5-star hotels, I believe we were told, in Mallorca. And
I thought that
that's
was
astounding
four
to me.
and 5, but I could be wrong.
Counting 4 and 5-star hotels?
Yeah, 100 seems a little too high there. Oh, I know what I wanted to say before we get away from golf. John, that was just for you. You know who you are. John gave me a review after we did Jacksonville, and we failed to mention that it was a golf destination. So we wanted to make sure that we covered that so that you knew that we were listening. One of the things we did the next day, and one of my favorite days, gosh, I think all of my days were the favorite days, but we did speaking of palatial estates, we went to a palatial estate that dated back to the Christian reconquest of the island in the 1500s, and then this is the Alfabia Gardens, is now known for these amazing gardens, beautiful, very Arab style gardens with water features and things like that, which I would recommend. I thought it was quite fun to go see that estate. And then we hopped on the train to Soler, which is one of the better known tourism experiences in the island, and fun. I thought it was beautiful. It's a beautiful old train that goes through the mountains, through tunnels, and goes to the town of Soler, this little town known for its orange groves, that built the train and then used to ship their oranges on the trains, but no oranges on the train while we were there. I enjoyed the train to Soler. I enjoyed our little time that we had in Soler. We were there pretty quick. I'm going to pause here for anybody else to comment.
That was our introduction, really, in getting into the Tramontana Mountains, which were absolutely stunning. And I had no idea that Mallorca would have this spectacular rocky coast. This is in the northwest part of the island. Many people from Palma, by the way, will do this trip to Soler on the train as a day trip. Right. Visitors do that as a day trip. That's fun, but it's just an entirely different environment. Suddenly you're not on a beach scene or around luxury hotels. You're in an authentic little old village. And this is, in fact, where Miro's wife's family was from. So he did summer there frequently. And when you get off this old train coming from Palma or from the gardens that we were at, you'll see exhibit space for both Picasso and Miro, because Picasso visited Miro while Miro was visiting Mallorca. It's a popular place through hundreds of years. But so that was a fun thing to see.
And then we went to the port of Soler, north of there. And Courtney, I believe you had your yacht was in the harbor that day, as I recall.
Yes, yes. It was. I didn't want to call attention to it, but yes.
Well, I had the zoom lens, so I was able to zoom in and see what the name on the back was. But,
we didn't actually get to the port. We did a nice overlook, and that was my dinghy attached to her yacht.
It was your dinghy attached to her yacht. That is an area that I would have spent more time. It was a beautiful area. I'm glad we did get to the other port that we'll talk about later on, but beautiful rugged coast with this city clinging to it. So many of the older cities are inland because of the pirates. Because pirates would come not just and loot, but well into the 1500s, 1600s, pirates would come and capture people and sell them into slavery. Our tour guides didn't mention this, but really up into the 1600s, it was predominantly in the Mediterranean to be on galley slaves, basically because you burned through the slaves on a galley. It was a very short lifespan. And so both the navies of the Turks as well as the navies of the Spain up until after the siege of Malta, for instance, later on, were practicing some of those patterns. And so the cities that we saw that were on the port would be newer cities than some of the interior cities like Soler. Yeah, and then we went around the coast, that rugged coastline that Kristin was talking about, with some, and our tour guide threw me here because she talked about millenary trees, olive trees, and I didn't know what a millenary olive tree was until she said, and some of them are centenary trees. It's, oh, I see. Okay, 1,000-year-old trees, not trees used for hats. But that confused me briefly there, and stopped at a property that had been developed by Sir Richard Branson. A beautiful, you talk about your luxury properties there. La Residencia, La Belmont Residencia.
Oh, La Residencia in the Deia neighborhood.
In the
Deia is
neighborhood,
the name of the
exactly,
port in the town.
Exactly.
Where Princess Diana also.
And then we got a chance to visit one of those lovely medieval villages that I love, and that was Valdemosa. That's the kind of places that I fall in love with. Palma, I thought was lovely, but I could spend a whole trip in the medieval villages like Valdemosa. And that one has historic links to Chopin, who was there with his older lover, we learned. And when people learned that he was not her son, they were less popular at that time than they are now in the city. And now they're quite popular with the Chopin Museum there. But beautiful town right there in the valleys of the mountains, as we talked about.
And we should mention that paramour of Chopin's was none other than the French author Georges Sand.
That is correct.
It's
George
another
being
reason,
a woman's name, which is
yes, George
confusing.
being a woman's name, and she had children by someone else, so this was very hard to embrace, yes, for the community. But I agree with you. We, because of logistics, of course, we stayed in Palma for 3 nights, and then in another place we'll talk about soon, Pollensa, but for 2 nights. I would absolutely love to spend 5 nights in Valdemosa or in Soller.
Yep, there's beautiful little towns. The other thing that Valdemosa is known for is it has its own saint. It is the birthplace of Saint Catherine of Palma, a mystic from the Middle Ages known for her wisdom. So we get to peek into a little chapel that was, I think, the place where she grew up, as I recall.
Oh, yeah.
And it turns out every village has their own saint and celebrations surrounding that saint. So I thought that was charming.
Yeah. Not always from there. Sometimes the saints are adopted from elsewhere. I don't think everybody gets their own saint just when you start a village, but
No.
Here you go. Here's your village. Here's your saint. But we did something very unusual the next morning, or we got up early morning. We drove to the other end of the island, to the west end of the island, and we did a water cycling adventure, salty cycling. And I had done something that was water cycling in Puerto Rico. And so I thought that was easy. I've done that before, so this should be fun. I was over optimistic with my capabilities of mastering what was a interesting but not easy experience. How would you describe this?
It was so much harder than it looked. And for listeners, it is a great addition to the entire, you can imagine there's water sports of every kind. This is an island. There's sailing, there's scuba, there's snorkeling, there's kayaking. You can get out and do your water sports all you wish. If you have that inclination, you'll want to try salty cycling because it's entirely different. It is similar to the hydrofoil boards that you might see that a lot of
Just
wakeboarders are
somebody
advancing.
yesterday on a hydrofoil board here in
Yeah,
California.
and those are tricky. I know from some of my talented young friends who are prone to those kinds of activities that it's harder than it looks. So anyway, our group was...
If we could describe this, think about a fitness cycle that you'd find in the gym, and now put it in the water, and at the bottom, 3 feet down, put 2 hydrofoils. And the idea here is that when you pedal it, it has a propeller at the bottom, and you rise up out of the water, and you can cycle on the waves on the hydrofoil. That's the idea. And then when the guide showed it to us, that's exactly how it worked.
Looks easy.
For us, it's okay, this thing wants to float at the water line, and you can't get on it at the water line because you have to be sitting on it. So you have to push it down. Now you have to mount it like a bike. You've got your guide who's helping you get on it for us. And you try not to immediately tip over forward or tip over backwards or tip over to one side because it's trying to float up. And then you have to pedal at one cycle at least that will engage the electric motor, and now you can use the electric motor to go. And the idea is that you go, you keep your balance, and then you gun it, and then you pull out of the water and you go. And all of that worked except for that last part for me. I got to the point where I finally mastered it. I could steer, I could do all these things, and I gunned it and nothing happened. I stayed in the water. They said, it doesn't have enough force. We were doing Spanish to English. We had a little bit of a language barrier, but a lot of sign language. It was clear that they needed to adjust mine, and we didn't quite get it adjusted. But we had a couple of people who got up. I think Abby and Paul got up for 10 seconds or something like that. I don't know if either of you had more success than I did.
I have video evidence of me actually getting up, but I was up for 20 seconds maybe, but I did not get to the point of being able to sit down and pedals. I was just standing on the pedals. I was still leaning forward, which is the maneuver you have to do as you gradually try to accelerate and bring it up without tipping over backwards. I did get up, but I never got beyond standing on the pedals, hanging on for dear life. I'll send you a picture.
And I wish I could say I did incredibly well, but I didn't go.
Smartest.
Because of that bum knee that kept me from going up the stairs of the cathedral too. But I went to a bakery instead.
You went to actually the next thing we were going to stop at, which is the olive grove. So you saw things we didn't see there. Just as we wrap up salty cycling, one of the reasons they're doing it in this part of the island, that eastern shore, I think I may have said western shore before, is that this is a very popular area for cycling. And I would have to say for the rest of our trip, as we were in the east and in the north, we saw cyclists all over the place. And I guess especially starting in September when the weather starts to cool down a bit, it's not cold weather by any means still, it's Mallorca and the Mediterranean, they get a lot of cyclists in the area. And so they're really trying to make this into a sport. And if you're a cyclist, I suspect it is easier. I thought I was a cyclist. But yeah, our next stop, you went to first, Courtney, and that was the olive-producing finca.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I misspoke. I forgot that was the day, because on the previous day when you guys had gone on the walking tour, I went to the bakery early, right before he opened, to try to talk to the owner. So on this day, because I was not about to do the cycling with you all, which sounds fabulous. Sorry I missed it. But so we went to Obacasa, which is a finca, which is another word for a country estate that started to be built in the 900s and was finished by the 1200s. So it's just incredible. It's such a testament to how well things are made there. But they do have wine there. They grew make wine, produce wine. But their main thing is that they produce olive oil and have this fabulous olive grove, which none of us ended up being able to go see because it started to pour rain just about the time you guys got there. But I had a few minutes with the manager. Her name was Tiffany Blackman, and recorded a podcast with her, which we're going to be publishing soon.
Let me know when you have that out. We'll put a link in the show notes.
I will, for sure. But the main thing there was that they do olive oil a little bit differently. They don't use the darker, riper olives, the black and the red. They use them when they're still green, which they feel results in a really lovely flavor and a silky texture. And in fact, they don't, when you go there, because you can go there for a tasting, you can go there for a wine tasting, and you can go there for an olive oil tasting. And they serve up the samples in a lovely little blue glass, kind of ball shaped. And the reason they do that is because people have such a notion in their heads that the darker the olive oil, the better the flavor, the more intense the flavor. And so they don't want you to be able to see the color of the olive oil, because in your mind, you'll think, oh, this is going to be too light. It's not going to be flavorful enough. So it's a blind taste testing. So we did get to do an olive oil tasting, and I think they only make the one. It's not like they do flavors like a garlic or anything.
The other thing that I did not know is when they were telling us they do only one variety of olive, and they were saying most olive producers can't even tell you what varieties they have. That was completely news to me. I wouldn't have expected that to be the case.
Yeah, so it's normally when the weather's lovely, you get to stroll the orchards and see the olive trees, and then also see how it's produced and have a tasting. And you can buy some. I think we all bought a bottle and brought it back home. So it's just this lovely pastoral experience in the agricultural region of Mallorca. So it was a treat, and it's definitely something people should do.
Yeah. Well, the other thing they do differently is they don't press the olives. They use centrifuges, which is a very different, non-traditional fashion. But yeah, a fun stop, despite the rain.
She talked about olive juice. That's how it started. Yeah.
Now, one thing we didn't do that was originally scheduled for that day, which I think I'm the only one of us who's had a chance to do before, is the caves, as we mentioned. And so one of the popular tourism trips, especially from the cruise ships and such, and that's what I did, it is to go out to the Drach caves. And the main reason that they canceled that for us and rescheduled and decided to do other things is the same thing that I found when I was there, is I would love to try to do it off season when there weren't cruise ships in port and when it wasn't as crowded, because in my opinion, they let in a few too many people at a time into the caves. And so it was just a little overcrowded when you were there. But it's quite a different experience if you've been in cave tours. This one includes a concert down below on the banks of an underground river. And then after the concert, you can get on the boat and go cruise down the underground river for a short distance and get off again. And I didn't do that when I was there because it was just too crowded. The lines for that were just too long. So
that's interesting. I didn't know it was a river. I thought it was a lake. Is it called the River Styx by any chance?
It is not called the River Styx, but it does bring that picture to mind, I will have to say. But if you were there, especially in the wintertime, tourism really is less in the wintertime in Mallorca. Many hotels, in fact, close. Some stay open all year round. This is an experience that would probably be much better off-season than it would be. Even in September, there were enough crowds that they said, maybe we won't do that with you. But an interesting experience that we did not do on this trip. We did do a quick stop at the Rafa Nadal Museum experience, how Spanish tennis star Rafa Nadal has built a whole complex to teach kids sports and an interactive museum. We didn't do interactive museums and we didn't learn any new sports, but we did stop to see this rather impressive complex there in the middle of the island.
Yeah, and doesn't it include a hotel and a school?
Oh my, yes.
Like beyond just a tennis school, like an academic school.
Yeah, a boarding school. Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
It's enormous. Yeah.
I would
Yeah,
have to say I enjoyed the sanctuary of Saint Salvador better, where we went up to a church on top of some mountains in the southeast corner of the island with the views for miles and miles, and that was a beautiful stop. And we did that kind of I think instead of the caves.
instead of the caves. And what
Yeah.
was interesting about that, back to your bicycling comment, is they've been really working on this bike tourism. And when we were going up to the San Salvador Chapel, you could see that was a popular local route for
It
cyclists.
was. Hikers also, but I don't think personally, I do like to cycle. I don't like to cycle on hills, and I don't like to cycle on hills in really windy roads where cars are coming around or buses. But yeah, lots of people were heading up there. Gorgeous views from there, so I could see why.
And there was a monument in the
Yeah.
chapel or to a local cyclist who I think had competed in the Tour de France.
Had won 6 times.
Is that
They
right?
had his 6 jerseys up in the chapel.
Yeah, up in the middle of nowhere.
Well, I think I was trying to say if he'd helped support the chapel or something. I didn't quite get the connection there, but yes, exactly.
And another word about cycling, pretty much everywhere we went, except that windy road, there were major bike paths on the city streets. Biking is really encouraged and welcome there. They devote a lot of space to making sure there's space for cyclists. And it's a big thing. And
I missed that.
Yeah.
Oh, I love a good bike path.
yeah, and the hotels will rent them out sometimes or check them out. And there are places that you can rent bikes from and just go for the day. And it'd be spectacular scenery.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, the mountains there, the Sierra Tramontana, are very rugged mountains. Remind me some of the mountains around Santa Barbara in California. Not a lot of trees on them necessarily, and very dry. The whole island is pretty dry. There are no permanent rivers on the island, which surprised me. For something with mountains like it has and the size that it is, there are torrents, which sounds like it would be a lot of water, but it's more like a dry riverbed where it's obviously seasonal rivers. Interesting. Then we moved to the north side of the island. We went up to the Bay of Poyensa, and that, I think, was my favorite part of the whole trip. Just a beautiful spot. Again, nothing to take away from Palma. Palma, I think, is a beautiful city, but I'm less of a city person. And now we we're staying in a hotel, or we were staying, you guys stayed in a different hotel from us. We were staying in a hotel that Agatha Christie had stayed in and written about. And so we're getting back to 100 years ago, there was high-end tourism in this area, especially with Britain, with the UK. I noticed our breakfast buffet, you could do a full English breakfast, which is always a clue where you're getting your tourists from there. But beautiful bay, beautiful area. When you get a group of travel writers and they check into a hotel and the guys at their hotel open their windows and start texting out, here's the view from my hotel room. That's not something we normally do. Now, Courtney, I know you didn't have the view from your hotel room the first night, so you did not text back yours, but it was a beautiful area.
I did send you a picture from my really huge patio, though, and
That's
said,
true.
Patio party over at my place.
Hey, Atlanta, Apple is open for small business. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. With privacy and security built in on all devices, it's easy for you to protect your customers' data. And if you need hardware or software support, you'll get advice from business experts at no cost whatsoever. So you can focus more on the soup du jour and less on, the other stuff. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/small business or visit an Apple store to learn more.
Just adding to what you're saying, Chris, I loved this area too. And I think it was the combination here of the port of Poyensa, where we were staying on this big, broad beach, and the historic town of Poyensa, which again is a bit inland, maybe 20 minutes from the port. And
a little way from the pirates.
The combination is just charming. It's a normal town with a contemporary efforts going into its exhibits and its public squares and public art layered on top of what's a very historic town and
Yeah, I was
with
going to say,
another
when you say
chapel.
a normal town, you mean regular people live there and it's not just a tourist town. You don't mean it's like the
Exactly.
town I grew up in.
I don't know. Are there seasonal tourists in your
There,
abnormal
there are
town?
definitely seasonal tourists in the town I grew up in, but it doesn't date back to the 1500s at least, was
Yeah, and
Poyensa.
that's why Spain, among other places, is so interesting. It's just layered history wherever you go, and I love the efforts that are being made to keep it modern while preserving and renovating and really using some of these spaces. And
Right.
now we can even talk about the hotels in that regard. The hotel we stayed in too, it didn't have the Agatha Christie heritage, but it was probably 100 years old, and
Yeah.
it's a classic old resort that they've modernized, but it still has that feel of days gone by. You just let out a sigh when you walk in the lobby and want to absorb some of that history.
Well, and right there on the, what do they call it? The route of palms or something? Pines. There was the pine walk that went along the bay, and then had the restaurants along it and some of the hotels, and you could walk all the way 20 minutes along to our hotel. Even there, we weren't right downtown like you guys were. But yeah, lovely. That's the port of Poyensa. That is the newer town, and newer being hundreds of years old instead of thousands. And I said Poyensa dates back to at least 1500s. So there are Roman ruins in this particular area, more up by the walled city that we went to on our last day, which was Alcudia. Alcudia. Thank you.
Alcudia.
Your Spanish is better than mine, Chris. And Alcudia, we didn't go to see the Roman ruins there, but there are Roman ruins just outside there, because this was one of the main cities in the Roman times before the invasion from the Moors in the 1200s. And so there are cities that go back 2,000 plus years in the area as well. So in the Roman times, the capital of the island was here, which was be closer to France and Italy, the part of the island that faced the rest of the Roman, either Republic or the Roman Empire. But during the Moorish times, it was moved down to Palma, which would then face more down to the Moorish Spain area. And so that's one of the reasons for the movement of the center of the population over years in the island.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And now, even in today's tourist profiles, this area of Poyensa was described to us as being 80% or more British visitors now.
Right. Without feeling like the hen party, stag party that you get in the south of Spain, though.
No, not at all. I mean, it's spread out. And of course, we weren't in the prime season and
That's true.
Big beaches. The airport seemed busy with visitors from Europe primarily.
Right.
It's almost all European visitors, but I didn't feel that way at all once we were visiting, that I was in a over-touristed place. Because we weren't on the beach.
Not t-shirt shops and things like that.
Yeah.
And weren't we told a few times that January and February is actually a really wonderful time to go to Mallorca? That the weather's still lovely and the crowds are way low. And although there are some things that are closed, there's still more than enough that is open.
Right.
And the hotels I noticed, are going out of their way of saying right on their homepage, we're open all year. So many places are open all year. And there are local events that are in the off season. This big film festival that we learned about, International Film Festival, that's been going on for, I think, at least 8 years.
Oh, the one in Palma.
Mallorca. Yeah, it's end of October, early November. What a great time to visit.
I notice that a lot of places in Europe do that the local events, the events that are not targeted necessarily at the tourists, are held in the either shoulder season or the off season. In many parts of Europe, that's the opera season and things like that as well. So it's not too surprising you don't hold that in July and August. Well, the other thing we didn't talk about in the north is the Cape Formentor, which that one caught me by surprise. I thought I knew a little more of what we were going to see, and we went up from Poyensa. There is a cape that sticks out to the northernmost point of Majorca, and you can drive that road, although they close it after they get so many cars, which is interesting if you're driving your own rental car there. But we took a van up to the Four Seasons restaurant, which I think you were making reference to the meals we had, and we visited the Four Seasons. We did not stay there. It's a lovely, lovely hotel, as one can imagine, and toured the facilities there. But the way up and the way back, that is such a stunning scenery in terms of the cliffs, and we stopped at the Mirador, the viewpoint on the way back, and I think that shoreline there for me competes with just about anything that I've seen in terms of rugged shorelines, the cliffs of Moher in Ireland or places like that. Very beautiful, and I'm surprised I hadn't heard about it. I really just was caught by surprise by that.
Yeah, I don't think I'd even seen a picture, and I didn't do deep dives into Mallorca before I traveled there. I just went on a wish and a prayer, but I too was astounded. And in general, because my preconception was this is a beach destination, I pictured the coastline as being more languid, long beaches, sandy beaches. And in fact, at least half, if not three-quarters of the coastline is this spectacular rocky cliff area. I should mention back to Poyensa Beach too. I talked with someone about that stretch of the beach, and they do enhance it. They dredge sand from the sea, or just off coast, and it's not like the Canary Islands where they literally shipped part of the Sahara Desert out to the Canary Islands for the visitors. But no, the Poyensa Beach was so nice, and just it was just widened a little bit by man.
You'll see that.
By mankind.
What else haven't we talked about that we should with Majorca?
I'd like to talk for a moment about that bakery that I went to, just because it's such a unique experience, and it's in Palma, and it's something that you absolutely have to go do when you're visiting. And it's called, again, El Fornet de la Soca. And it was opened in 2010 by a husband and wife who were in drastically different careers from bakery. I can't remember what the wife did. I think it was accounting, but the husband was a psychoanalyst. And they decided they wanted to completely change and opened this bakery, but with the focus being on A, always using local and organic ingredients, but B, and most importantly, using historic recipes. So he gave me an example of, there was a monastery that closed down. I didn't know monasteries closed down, but apparently they do. And they got a recipe for a baked good from their cookbooks. And so everything you have in there is very traditional. And when we went first thing in the morning while you guys were starting your walking tour, it was really fun to watch, because the little local ladies come with literally with a cart filled with bags that they fill up. They get all their goods and fill up. Who knows how long that lasts them. And then when we went back in the afternoon, it was much more of a tourist customer base. But everything that's there, Chris, you were in there with me, it's just so tantalizing. And one of the main things they make that they're really famous for is called ensaimada, which we had other places, but not nearly as good as it was from this bakery. And basically it's a twisted and then braided light dough that's then formed into a circle and then sprinkled with powdered sugar. And sometimes it has a filling in it, and they do that at the bakery, but their main one is not filled with anything. And I asked him, Tomeo, the owner, why, and he said, when you have ingredients this good and this high quality, you shouldn't need to put the filling in. It should taste so wonderful on its own. And it did, in fact. And so you'll see people walking around with these octagonal boxes that are an ensaimada packaged up. And it's a real souvenir that people get and take back. Fornet de la Soca is definitely a place to stop and really get really not only authentic, but historically authentic baked goods of all kinds.
What else should we mention?
I would just like to mention that, again, back to my preconceived notions of this being a beach destination, and quite frankly, I thought it would be over-touristed, that I would be hard-pressed to meet local people rather than other visitors.
Well, there have been a lot of articles about over-tourism in Spain, and Barcelona and Mallorca are the two places that are
Right.
talked about most. So it's not just that you pulled these preconceived notions out of thin air.
No, and in fact, Mallorca as well as Barcelona had some of the protests against tourism this summer. They exceeded every other region of Spain in hotel beds booked in the month of August. But it's so refreshing to actually see that there's a variety of things to do. And maybe for a couple who one person likes to spend a little bit more time on the beach and the other doesn't, you have different inclinations of what you want to do with a week on holiday there. You can do it all, and you can combine things even in a day. You could spend some time at the beach and then go to Valdemosa and see an historic village. You can have an excellent dinner, and it's quite easy to get here and there, either with your own car or with public transportation. It's possible to get around. And that really impressed me, that there's just the variety of things to do. Also, speaking about the hospitality, it was interesting for me to learn that back when, at post-World War II, when tourism was starting, this is also when the fincas, the estates, were struggling with their economy. And the fincas were small farms, basically, and trying to support their large estates with not a whole lot of land and limited kinds of produce. Excellent produce, but limited. And what happened is, historically, the eldest son was inheriting that finca. And after World War II, as people started having the wherewithal, the time, and the money to vacation from Europe, all of a sudden, the interest in the beaches came up. And so the families were shifting, the second sons, if you will, or maybe, dare we say, a daughter, going out to the coast and starting a hotel. So now the upshot for me, all of a sudden that town property in Palma or the coastal property was much more valuable.
Yeah, I think they told us the eldest son would get the finca, which was the most valuable, and if there was another house in town, maybe the second son would get it, and that it really switched in terms of which became the most valuable. Yeah.
But the essence of that too, of that story, is what I took away from it is there is a really ingrained sense of hospitality in Mallorca, and an understanding of how important it is, how precious it is, how it needs to be guarded. And they're working like crazy to be sure people do know that you can go into the mountains and you can go to an olive oil tasting. You can go to a fantastic multi-generational textile manufacturing place.
Which we didn't even talk about, right up there in Poyensa.
Yeah, really some outstanding crafts and arts and local operations in hospitality and in manufacturing and food industry that are really understanding the future of their own livelihood and the need for us as visitors to realize, hey, use the entire year to visit and do spread out and look at other parts of the island. Two cases in point. One is back to what Courtney was talking about in that cooking class. I thought it was very interesting at Malta Cay that Luis said they found that hiring people who understand hospitality and facilitating groups, a small group like this, and helping people feel comfortable is the key ingredient he looks for in hiring. He knows he doesn't need a chef who doesn't have the hospitality skills. He needs somebody in hospitality, and he can work with the cooking skills. So I thought that was great. And also just a little fun for me was one lunch we had that we haven't mentioned that was in, oh, I think I'll get it right, Porto Cristo, I believe.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Which is we visited there right after seeing the Nadal Academy, the impressive Nadal Academy. It turns out we had I thought the best meals of our stay was at this nondescript little Faro gastropub, right overlooking the port. Which was pleasure boats and fishing boats. And, oh, by the way, Nadal's big catamaran. And looking across the way, oh, that's Nadal's house over there. I got a big kick out of that. It was very relaxed, a non-touristy place with an excellent meal and just enjoyed sitting outside. So that was a great highlight for me.
Excellent. Courtney, do you have a highlight before we get to our wrap-up questions?
Oh my gosh. I think the cooking class was a highlight for me, even though it came early, just because I really advocate doing food tours and cooking classes when you visit somewhere. And this was just truly educational about the region, the local cuisine, the ingredients, the methods, tactics, the recipes, ways to do things. We were learning things on so many different levels. And then to finish it all off with a really great meal, it was just such a wonderful experience and such a wonderful way to get to know and embrace Mallorca while we were there. And I was really glad we did it towards the beginning of the trip because it just helped me look for certain things, like noticing the difference with the paella, Kristin, that you mentioned as we went through the trip. I'd really encourage people to do that early on as a, pardon the pun, great entree into culinary things you're going to experience.
Excellent. As we get to our wrap-up questions, you are standing in the prettiest spot in Mallorca. Where are you standing and what are you looking at? And Courtney, we're going to pick on you first this time.
Now, I kept getting confused about some of these beautiful places that we were stopping, windy roads, because I'm not good on windy roads and I just put myself la la land. But it was the one, and identify which one it was, where we stopped and pulled over. It was one of the windiest roads, and there were all those boats down below, like big yachts with their little baby boats coming out from them, and the water was so blue. What was that coastline?
Is it the one where we took the picture of the whole group?
No.
Okay.
No, I think we took a picture up at the top, but we pulled over and it was just super windy, but
were we looking over people's fences to?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Then they're in the Porto Soler.
Okay, yeah, that was really.
That was where your boat was.
Yes, exactly. How did I forget that? I get my yachts mixed up. I get them confused. You have to forgive me. But yeah, it was just unreal. I had to remind myself, this is real. This isn't just a picture on my computer screen. This is real, and we get to see it, and people get to live there and see. That's just Tuesday for them. It's really spectacular.
Kristin, where are you standing?
I kind of have a three-way toss-up, but the first is an overlook that we haven't talked about, which was called Son Maroig, I think it's called. And that was after being in that Daya area.
So you're in the northwest corner of the island. Yep.
Right. And
right by Michael Douglas's house.
Yes, that's right. We're driving along this road with cliffs hanging down, and our guide says, yeah, it's somewhere, one of these drives goes down to Michael Douglas's house and Catherine Zeta-Jones. But that was an incredible lookout because there was a road that went down there. And what you couldn't see from our vantage point was that there was a restaurant way down at the rocky end of this. It's like a natural pier coming out from this overlook. There was also a hole in the rock. So at one point you could see a boat. You could see it through the hole in the rock as it chased along the waters there. Presumably they just had lunch at this restaurant that is easier to get to by boat than down the rocky cliffs. And I just also stay with a few pictures of these very narrow medieval streets in some of the old towns. They're not the whitewashed cities of southern Spain. They're of stone. It's a very rocky island, and the stones, walls, and the stone structures in this same part of Mallorca really made an impression on me.
Excellent. And for me, I think I already said it was the Formentor, the Cape Formentor area.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Mallorca. And Kristin, we'll pick on you first this time.
Oh, what really makes me laugh is watching the videos of the five of us trying to accomplish a ride on the salty cycling. And I believe there's one of you, Chris, you're tooling around, you're moving forward, but you're mostly submerged. And I think you ran right into a buoy. So you got to watch that. It's very funny. It was a lot of fun.
Courtney.
I know it's going to sound like I'm obsessed with Moltak, but...
Well, it sounds like you're obsessed with food, period, but we already knew that.
Yes, food and travel, thus real food traveler. I think that only in Mallorca could you, and at that place, could you bring together a bunch of strangers over food, over instruction, and sit everybody around a kitchen, and like you would in somebody's home. That was one of his efforts, was that this would just feel like you're all gathering together at Mama's house, and everybody cooks together, and that you could bring together all these strangers and cook together and eat together, and everybody had so much fun. There was, like you said, there was so much laughter coming from the other group and from our group. And he said that's just the way it is every single time. Only in Mallorca could you gather strangers together to cook, eat, and have a great time together.
The one thing that I thought was odd, was funny, was when we were in the cathedral, this great big Gothic cathedral. We one of the tallest, if not the tallest in Europe. And you're looking up at the big rose window, and then occasionally you'd see somebody walk by on the outside. Like, this is not something I'm used to seeing. So, but we then later on ourselves walked right by that rose window and probably amused someone else. But excellent. If you had to summarize Mallorca in just 3 words, what 3 words would you choose? We'll go round robin.
Now, Kristin, I'm going to turn it to you.
Oh, you. I'll take 3 words. Mediterranean island retreat.
Excellent. We'll give you the last 3 words for that. And then if people want to learn more about you, Kristin, we're going to send people to travelpast50.com. Is there a particular post we should send people to?
There is a post about best things to see in Mallorca. So when you get to travelpast50.com, you can look for that. And a host of other Spain posts. We cover Spain probably more than any other destination.
We'll put a link to it in the show notes to make it easy. So, and then you have a Minnesota site also, which probably has nothing about Mallorca.
It has nothing about Mallorca, but a lot about water, because we do have 10,000 lakes in Minnesota, and it's a vacation destination for a lot of Midwesterners, at least. That is MNTrips, mntrips.com. Thanks.
Excellent. And then Courtney, if we wanted to send people to the best post on realfoodtraveler.com, are we going to send them to your podcast that's up and the one that's coming, or is there another one we should send them to also?
Actually, I'm going to end up having 3 different podcasts and an upcoming article on the quintessential foods you need to have when you're on Mallorca. So some are already there, some are coming depending on when this runs. But yes, so start at realfoodtraveler.com. And there's also a tab there for our podcast. So I always pair an article with every podcast so that you have a visual and live links to click on. So go there and you can get it all.
And is there a hint there for foods that are must-tries in Mallorca that we haven't mentioned so far on the show?
Yes, there's a dish called tumbet, which is a perfect example of Mediterranean cuisine that is layers of potato, eggplant, zucchini squash, and tomato with lots and lots of olive oil on it. And different people do it different ways, but it's typically picture a ratatouille kind of thing. And it's something that families have all the time. It's just a very typical dish and very delicious and very easy.
Well, thank you both for joining me and for bringing with you your newfound love for the island of Mallorca.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
A special thanks to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially, and thanks to the advertisers as well, as this is my day job now. If you're interested in learning how you can get an ad-free version of the show and whatever else you can get by being a patron, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. I'm going to be taking off one of the 2 next weeks because I'll be traveling to Albania, North Macedonia, Kosovo, Montenegro, and then going to Turkey, to Istanbul for the SATW conference, the Society of American Travel Writers. If you're going to be at the conference, come say hi. And then we have episodes coming up on both Manila, or day trips rather, from Manila, as well as one on Lyon, France. So subscribe so that you don't miss any future episodes of Amateur Traveler. We also have blog posts up recently on a trek in Nepal, the Upper Dolpo Trek, as well as a 2-day adventure guide to Lake Placid in the Adirondacks. So go to amateurtraveler.com to learn more. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to chris2x@gmail.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.